What if your fertility, your hormones, and your healing journey aren't random, but written in your genes? Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry, your Reproductive Rebel, and in this episode, I sit down with Jaclyn Downs to explore the emerging field of neurogenomics, where your DNA and your nervous system weave the blueprint of your reproductive health. Together, we uncover how your genetic code influences fertility, hormones, mood, healing, and how you can begin working with your body's design instead of against it. Listen to Beyond the Genome, How Neurogenomics Shapes Fertility, Hormones, and Healing, streaming now on Reproductive Rebel. Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an East Asian medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women to live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your health, offering holistic solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are, I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. I am joined today by Jaclyn Downs. Welcome to the show, Jaclyn.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So Jaclyn and I had a really cool conversation that was genetics focused. And I think that is a topic that we haven't talked nearly enough about on this show. So for people who are listening, can you share a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure, yes. So I am a functional genomics analyst. So that means I can look at your genes and see predispositions for how well your body is able to detoxify and how well your body is able to make antioxidants or utilize fats or break down neurotransmitters or hormones, that kind of stuff. So these are functional genomics, which means these are genes that you can do something about to support the functioning of. So rather than genetic mutations like muscular dystrophy, these are genes that we can support the functioning of through nutritional interventions and other protocols.
Very cool.
Yeah. And I also am a published author of an academically published book called Enhancing Fertility Through Functional Medicine, using nutrigenomics to solve unexplained infertility.
I love that. So now you could just see from that introduction why I had her on, everybody. So one thing that was really fascinating to me when we talked before this recording, and one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on, is talking about cell health and oxidative stress.
Yes, it all comes down to the health of the cell, because our cells are what make our tissues and our glands and our organs and our whole systems. And so our cells are just like little tiny units that need nutrients to come in. They need to be able to communicate with other cells, and they need to be able to get rid of waste. And so a healthy cellular membrane is super important, but also the information that the cell contains. And so cellular health can dictate how much inflammation or oxidative stress that you have. And oxidative stress is damage to the cell. So it is damage to the cellular structure, but also damage to the information that the cell contains. And that oxidative stress is the reason why we need antioxidants to fight off that oxidative stress. And the body has such a great mechanism and innate wisdom for balancing the antioxidants with the free radicals and the oxidative stress, because we do need oxidative stress. If we didn't have any oxidative stress, we wouldn't be able to fight off pathogens and fight off getting sick, and our immune systems wouldn't be working. And so it's just that in this modern day that we live in, there's so many things that are burdening our body and causing our body to have to constantly put out these fires. So a lot of us are burning through our antioxidants that our body makes or that we get through food. or we have genetic predispositions that might predispose us to not making them as abundantly or not recycling them or not being able to use antioxidants properly. And so we're already at a disadvantage. And then you throw the modern toxins and stressors on and everything, and then our bodies just can't keep up. And then that's what starts causing inflammation and oxidative stress and damage to the cell and degeneration or imbalance in one system or another.
I was actually going to just ask you, for people who aren't familiar with oxidative stress, how does that happen?
So biochemically, an antioxidant works by donating an electron. Mm-hmm. And so when we have enough electrons and they're moving and they're being donated, that's great. But when we don't have enough antioxidants, we're creating a cascade because the body's going to steal what it needs from its neighbor to neutralize a free radical. And then that just sets off a chain reaction.
Yep. I talk about this in a little bit different way with Chinese medicine, but it's very similar that like if there's not enough power in one place or another, it will borrow power from another place in order for the organ system to function properly. And there are some places that can give a little more of themselves, but it's no different than like your cell phone battery. Like it gets down to 5% and you have to plug it in. Otherwise you can't use it anymore.
Yeah. And so it's all about, robbing Peter to pay Paul, because the body has the hierarchy of needs for processes that need to take place. And I have said that the more important that a process is to take place, the more backup routes the body has. Mm-hmm. So for instance, degrading estrogen, right? People just say they blame everything on MTHFR, which we can talk about, but it is so important to make sure that estrogen is properly transported. And it is so important to make sure that estrogen is properly transported and converted and degraded, that it is really handled not only by your methylation, but also your glucuronidation and your sulfation, and your gut microbiome plays a big part in it. And so there's so many things, so many steps that take place. And if one is genetically weak or impaired because of some toxins or injury or something like that, the other routes can step in and help pick up the slack.
Yeah, that actually kind of dovetails me to another question. You had mentioned oxidative stress versus inflammation. Mm-hmm. I think these are terms that people hear a lot in the news and in the doctor's office and all of that type of stuff. But I think for some people, it's hard to make concrete in their brain what that is and what the difference is between the two.
Yes. Yeah. So inflammation is pretty much a household term, right? Right. Very common. And part of my aim for writing my book was to make oxidative stress as common of a term. Mm-hmm. And when I was writing my book and doing the research, I went down a research tangent because some of the studies I was looking at was saying that inflammation caused oxidative stress. And then other studies were saying that oxidative stress caused inflammation. So it's really this negative, vicious cycle. And so I think more of inflammation as the symptoms that you feel. So the redness, the swelling, the achiness, all of that is more how people typically think of inflammation, whereas oxidative stress would be more of the cellular biochemical reaction that's causing the inflammation. However, like I said, one does cause the other.
Yep, absolutely. And some level of inflammation is useful. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that people don't understand either. It's when it becomes chronic and excessive that it becomes a problem.
Yes, 100% for sure.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of misnomers around that, because like I'll have people that'll come into my practice and they're like, oh, well, I'm taking turmeric to help with inflammation. And that's great. But like your body needs some, just mm-hmm. not excessive. So what can we do in your day-to-day and your lifestyle choices and what you're bombarding your system with to like decrease why this has become a chronic issue for you?
Yes. Well, practically, we can avoid the toxins, and I recommend pulsing your antioxidant support, because that way, if you're taking it every other day or 2 days on, 2 days off or something like that, you're giving your body time to have that inflammatory response. However, some of us have genetic predispositions for just having really trigger happy inflammatory messengers. So it's like turning on a fire hydrant to put out a birthday candle, right?
Yes.
And so that can cause an issue as well. And so it's that Goldilocks zone for sure.
Oh, absolutely. You had mentioned MTHFR. I am familiar with it. I do hear it thrown around, and people who come into my office and have done some legwork generally before they get to me. But I do think that there are a lot of people who are affected by it and don't realize that they are. Can you expand upon what MTHFR is?
Yes. So MTHFR, which stands for methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase, is a gene that makes an enzyme of the same name. Most genes are the exact same name as the enzyme they produce. So every single gene in our body makes an enzyme that causes a reaction to happen in the body. But those enzymes require nutritional cofactors or helpers or spark plugs in order to be able to do their job. And if they are variated, or as a lot of people say, mutated, or you have a SNP, which is a single nucleotide polymorphism, which basically is this little change in it, then that can affect how that enzyme works. It might speed it up, or it might slow it down, or you might not have it all together. And so with MTHFR, a lot of people think that it is what converts your folic acid into methylfolate. And that is incorrect. That is actually a 5-step process to take synthetic folic acid that is found in fortified foods. It's not found in any produce. It doesn't occur naturally in nature. But people forget about the other genes and enzymes involved. So MTHFR is what adds a methyl group onto a form of folate that turns it into methylfolate, which is the form of folate that the body uses, also called the bioactive form. So this is a clinical pearl that your listeners can take away from this, and they can know more than most influencers out there and many doctors, is that MTHFR doesn't convert folic acid into methylfolate. It's the DHFR gene that converts folic acid into a form of folate, and then MTHFR adds that methyl group and turns it into methylfolate to drive methylation and all of the millions of reactions that require methylation.
So this one becomes important when we're talking about fertility. I have had clients come in who are like, yeah, I'm being sent for screening to see if I have MTHFR because they think it could potentially be one of the reasons why I'm struggling to get pregnant. Can you expand upon why that would be? Because I don't think even the people who are being sent for testing get a really good explanation of why that could be a factor.
So folate, just like iron, just like choline, which choline is the forgotten nutrient that is, I think, just as important, if not more important than folate. But it is a very critical nutrient for conceiving and for pregnancy and for a healthy child, because that folate helps to drive the methylation pathway, which makes DNA, repairs DNA, makes neurotransmitters, helps to degrade them. And so it has so many functions in the body. And so if we do not have enough folate, or we're getting folic acid and our body is not able to efficiently go through that conversion process to turn it into methylfolate, then our bodies will be deficient. And if you're not able to convert the folic acid into methylfolate through those few steps, then unmetabolized folic acid can build up. And there are studies on PubMed that show unmetabolized folic acid has its own host of problems in the body and can actually lead to certain types of cancers as well. So you could have excess folic acid, but your cell could be deficient in folate. So I don't really recommend folic acid for anybody, whether or not you have MTHFR. And again, you really want to look at your DHFR and your folate receptors, because if the folate can't even get into the cell to work, then it doesn't matter what your MTHFR looks like. So I really want people to know that we can't just focus on MTHFR. I'm not discounting the importance of it, but we just place too much emphasis on it, and people are only testing for that or a handful of genes, and you can't get a comprehensive enough picture as to what's going on with your methylation pathway or any of the other pathways in the body.
I think that's a really good point, and actually kind of leads me into the fertility side of this a little bit. This is an area I specialize in, so I find this fascinating. And I know I have a lot of listeners that listen for various aspects of like fertility wisdom, for example. So if there are other pathways and other players in this fertility equation, how would you go about either articulating what some of those are or things that people should be aware of if they are maybe struggling on their conception journey?
You want to make sure that you start with food first, because food is information for our genes, and food contains those nutritional cofactors that allow our genes and enzymes to do their jobs. And so the more that I learn about the various biochemical pathways and the genes related, it really does all come back to the food. But how much you need of a certain nutrient is dictated by your genes. So your level of beta carotene or vitamin A could be vastly different than your next door neighbors. And your needs could be very different because maybe you have a genetic predisposition for not being able to convert beta carotene, which is the plant-based form of vitamin A, the precursor, into retinol, which is the form that our body needs and uses. And so again, right there, you could have a buildup of beta carotene, but you could be deficient in vitamin A. And so knowing your genetic predispositions can really help to inform where your body might need additional support.
I think that's a really interesting one that you mentioned, because I actually do have that issue. And I discovered it because I had some genetic testing done, more like what you do, when I was on my own journey for conception related challenges. If you have things like that, that you have an excess, whatever it is, whether it's beta carotene, and you can't convert it, is it always a blanket issue? Like there's a buildup over here, so that could indicate, I don't know, cancer, a chronic issue, something like that? Or is there a way to clear out the excess if you're somebody who my OBGYN has said, make sure that you're taking a multivitamin with folic acid in it? I've been taking it for 5 years, and I've now found that I can't do this conversion as efficiently for whatever reason. So now I have this buildup, for example.
The book Bitter or Better, I Decide by Hannah Koch is a practical and uplifting guide to turning life challenges into stepping stones. Bitter or Better shows how to understand yourself, resolve conflict, strengthen relationships, and reconnect with the source of love so you can choose better, not bitter, every day. For more information, go to bitterorbetteridecide.com.
Yeah. So for everybody, it's going to be different because, like I said, there's multiple checks and balances. And so some people will be way more impacted by that lack of conversion than other people. And so cutting it out from supplementation or from diet where you can, and bringing in the form that your body can use, will help to bring balance to the body. It just depends on how long it would take for that to happen.
The excess will naturally clear itself out then. Eventually,
yes.
So that's really important to know, because I think sometimes we get really stuck on this whole idea of protocols, and we need a protocol to do a thing. And instead of being able to trust the body's natural wisdom, that it already knows how to process out some of these things. And so, yes, genetic variations and mutations and whatnot can affect our ability to process some of these things out. But I do think that there's a lot of inherent wisdom in the body that in some ways, some supplement companies have kind of capitalized on, because they're like, oh, but you need this product in order to be able to do this.
Yes. But here's another important clinical pearl and a takeaway for the listeners, is that just because you have a genetic variant does not mean that it's expressing. And people talk about genes and epigenetics like it's a light switch off and on. But in my book, I talk about how it's more like a dimmer switch. And there's certain things that can dial it up or dial it back. Or sometimes there might be a huge stressor or trauma or something like that. And that will just completely turn it on or turn it off to full expression. But really, especially being in a symphony with other genes and enzymes that can constantly be turning up the dial or turning down the dial, affecting that one specific one that you're focusing on. So it's really dynamic, but it should be taken into consideration, especially if you have any kind of chronic or puzzling condition that you're trying to get to the root of.
I love this. So if you were to give listeners first steps, like, okay, this is really fascinating to me. This is an area of my health I haven't explored yet. How do I get started?
So I have written some blogs on what to look for and what to look out for with genetic testing, because so many companies are coming onto the scene and people don't know how much they don't know. They don't know how much they're not seeing. And so I have been speaking about this and writing about this because I'm just seeing so many people getting ripped off, or people are coming to me with genetic reports from other companies and saying, I'm even more confused than I was before. Can you help me make sense of this? And I'm like, well, I can't really tell you much based on 30 genes. I just can't. And especially, I don't mean to get into the weeds here, but each gene that we have can have hundreds of variants for a single gene. And so most of these tests are only looking at one or two variants for that gene. So maybe you're not variated in that particular variant they're looking at.
Yes.
But you could be riddled with the ones that they're not looking at. So again, you're not seeing the whole picture. In my book, I say that this is like thinking you know what a puzzle looks like based on 2 or 3 pieces. You just can't get enough information. So that being said, I am biased for the company that I use because I have seen so many, and nothing compares to the functional genomic analysis that I run, because it's looking at all of the SNPs for each gene. And even though some are clinically validated and there have been studies to see how impactful they are, it also includes the non-clinically validated ones. So just because a genetic variant has not been studied doesn't mean it's not impactful. It doesn't mean it shouldn't be included in the results or the analysis. It's just we don't know how impactful it is. So I think get a comprehensive genetic test with a interpretation by a live human, because all of these tests are now designed for high volume and they can run thousands a day. But that's because they're just using AI, and if this, then we're going to slap that result in, and they're only reporting about your genes, not about you and what you have going on and what your previous diagnoses are and what has worked and what hasn't worked and what supplements you're currently taking. And are you eating properly? Are you drinking enough water? What's your stress level? What exposures have you had? For instance, a lot of my clients have lived in a moldy environment. Maybe they grew up in one, or maybe they live in one currently. But it doesn't matter what your genes are. If you're living in a moldy house and you have mycotoxins, that is what you need to deal with. But any other company is not going to know that. They're just going to tell you what supplement to take and maybe eat some more, Mediterranean-based diets, or add more fruits and vegetables in, or something, or, eat grass-fed meat. And a lot of those are just really generic, and they're things that people should be doing anyway. So they're not really specific. They're not ultra personalized like a human crafted genetic report is.
I agree with that completely. That's one thing that I see with my clients too, is they're just like, so what is your pricing? Like, it's a generic kind of thing. And it's like, well, no, like I actually customize this to what your body needs, because your body has unique needs. While there are certain patterns in traditional Chinese medicine, and like, yes, like I'll be able to kind of put one of these patterns together for a root cause. At the same time, like your body is unique. You have your own stressors. A yin deficient body is going to look a little different when you're under intense amounts of stress versus, I pace myself well. I don't overeat. I am mindful about what I eat, when I eat it, movement. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, you can't put apples and oranges together. It's very different.
Yes, I love that. And it's not a quick fix either, because I do get a lot of people that have been to 12 different doctors, right? And they just haven't gotten answers. And then usually they're out of money by then, or they're, they've tried a whole bunch of stuff, or they come to me being on 20 different supplements. These worked, these didn't. And then they want me to recommend this protocol. And I can't do that because it's not going to be personalized, and it will invalidate my knowledge by just trying to fit somebody into a protocol as opposed to custom crafting one specifically for them. So oftentimes you do get what you pay for, especially if you're paying, $300 for a genetic interpretation. That's not going to be comprehensive, but it can really get some people on a really good start on their journey, because maybe they weren't aware of the plastics or pesticides, or maybe they weren't eating and to nourish their body. I have a chapter in my book that says don't eat a healthy diet, eat a nourishing diet, because so many things say they're healthy. But so especially for some people that are getting started on their journey, there are a lot of low-hanging fruits and lifestyle and diet upgrades that are recommended, and that could be great. But if you're doing all of the things and you still have this big, huge question mark hanging over you and your health or your fertility, that's really where the genetics can shine, because they can just really tell you where in the haystack that needle is likely going to be found in that area.
So this show is geared primarily for women's health and women's focused issues, but the same considerations can be said also for male fertility as well.
Yes. 50%, right? 50 and
correct.
50, pretty much. Yeah.
And I think that's something that is important to note. And I know because of what you do, you're of course. And for me, of course, we're going to need to look at the male side of this, but you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't given what you do. But I find that there's a lot of pushback from male partners around, oh no, I'm fine. And just getting a semen analysis sometimes is the biggest fight in the entire world. And yet we're seeing epidemic levels of male infertility these days. And just simply having enough sperm in the count is not enough. DNA fragmentation is a consideration. Morphology, motility are part of the equation. And that's just the surface level stuff, let alone what you're talking about, which is a much deeper look at what is actually going on inside of his body as well.
Yes. Well, when we humans are conceived, we have all of the same makeup. It's just as we get older, our hormones get in different ratios and everything. So we're not that different. Mm-hmm. And the health of the egg and the health of the sperm are very vulnerable to oxidative stress. Mm-hmm. And so because the body is so wise and it knows that it doesn't need to make a baby to stay alive, it's going to rob Peter to pay Paul in order to put out fires. And so reproduction is going to be last on its list. And so sperm are especially vulnerable, but men are really lucky because they are able to fully optimize the health of their sperm. Now, it has been thought that egg health can't be improved, but it actually can.
I'm saying I believe that it can.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But men just have it. They're able to drastically improve the health of their sperm within just a few months of certain changes. And so I do feel especially, is that person going to be contributing and thinking that they're not the problem once they have the child for whatever issue might come up, so it's taking ownership and getting your skin in the game and checking all boxes to make sure that you can have the healthiest child possible, the most genetically resilient child. So just having a healthy baby is having a baby with 10 fingers and 10 toes might be the end goal, but really, how does that child function executively, cognitively, behaviorally, immune system wise? There's so many more allergies and issues with autoimmunity and all kinds of stuff. And so I think it's using the genetics and your body's innate wisdom for choosing seasonal foods and organic foods and all of that is what really helps to make a robust baby that is able to meet its full genetic potential.
And I love that. I'm so glad you worded that this way because you're talking about it very much from the science lens. And I have this exact same conversation from the TCM lens because, as corny as it sounds, you really are what you eat. And there's a lot of people that come to their fertility journey with this idea of, well, one, conception is easy because that's how they sell us birth control, right? Is that conception is easy. And a lot of people find it's not as easy as they thought it would be. And that there really should be prep work done ahead of time in terms of diet, lifestyle, how you are managing your experience with your life, really. And I say it that way because this is work stress, home stress, overscheduling yourself, creating time for meaningful rest, making sure that you're nourishing your soul with play, like all of these kinds of things. And a lot of times by the time couples reach me, they have been on their journey long enough that like the joy and the excitement around bringing life into the world has really fizzled out because they're just so stuck in the biological, like eggs and sperm meeting. Is it time? Am I ovulating? And then we just have to do the deed because it's time. And those aspects get lost. And so like those things can stand in the way of your fertility because it's a form of creating stress in the body that affects the way your reproductive system shows up.
Yes, 100%. And not just like on a cortisol biochemical level, but that stress is information for your genes.
Yes.
And so everything that we do, all of these inputs, physically, mentally, emotionally, nutritionally, toxin-wise, all of that shapes your genome, but also shapes so many other functions in your body as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This has been such an incredible conversation. I've been looking forward to this because I love being able to weave the Western way of looking at things in with my Eastern training. And I feel like we're definitely saying the same things, just with a slightly different vocabulary. And that's exactly what I tell my clients on a regular basis is like, yes, there really is science behind what I'm saying. I'm just saying it to you with a different vocabulary than you might hear it from another practitioner. But really what it comes down to is we do have to manage the stressors that hit our system: environmental, internal, external, expenditure of energy, all of these kinds of things. We really are what we eat. The quality of it, the sourcing of it, being mindful of the fact that beauty products are a huge disruptor.
Yes,
you know, what kinds of things am I putting on my skin? Am I washing my hair with? Like, it's wild when you really start looking at all of the different ways that we have stressors hit our system.
I could not agree more. And in my book, I say that survival of the fittest has now come to mean people that proactively educate and advocate for themselves and their families and their health, because what we're being fed, literally and figuratively, is just making us sick and causing us more stress and placing more burden on the body. And so it is the people that are going to advocate for themselves, educate themselves, and rise above the conventional, what's being fed to us. Those are the people that are going to conceive healthy babies that meet their full genetic potential.
I love that. Do you have any final thoughts that you would like to leave our listeners with before we sign off?
I would say to practice this is better than that approach. So that way you don't create this huge wagon in which to fall off of and beat yourself up about. It's just, what can I do today? Or what choices can I make today that were better than the last time I made those choices? And so we're just constantly learning, constantly evolving, constantly improving.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I learned a lot. I know my listeners learned a lot. If they wanted to reach out to you for services, how could they get a hold of you?
They could go to my website, which is just my name, JACLYN DOWNS, jaclyndowns.com. And you can book a consultation there with me. You can learn more about having me read your genes. You can get my book there. There's some freebies there. And I also have a weekly newsletter called the Gene Scene, where it spotlights a different gene each week or something genetically related, because I really wanted to spread the word that there's so much more out there beyond just MTHFR. And so it's a fun, short little weekly newsletter. And then you can also find me on Instagram at Functional Genomics, and you can send me a message there too.
I love that. Thank you again so much for sharing your wisdom, Jaclyn. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and acutonics practitioner, herbalist, and Chinese nutritional therapist, Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like and follow us at Moon Essence Me on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.